Corporate advertising is such a huge part of our daily lives. We see it pretty much everywhere, from our TV shows to the radio, if anyone still listens to that, and of course, all over the internet. There's a good chance that you watched an ad to get to this video. But the video game industry has surprisingly been mostly spared from an overwhelming amount of advertisements in our video games. Outside of mobile gaming, that's obviously the big exception, like especially when you download a free game, there's banner ads and a bunch of ads all over the place, video ads, but when we're talking about console and PC, advertising really isn't much of a thing. The only examples I can think of from the top of my head are sports games, like if you're playing NBA 2K23, for example, when there's a timeout or a break or whatever, it mentions Gatorade, but I'm pretty sure the NBA and Gatorade already have a partnership, and the video game is just an extension of that. And I remember back in the day, Obama, when he was running for president, would actually have banners in the actual games themselves. There were certain games that he did that, like I think in Madden he had that, Burnout Paradise, and a number of other games where it actually had Obama ads, like real Obama ads in the actual game. And I'm actually surprised that we haven't seen more of it over the years, especially considering just how much advertising dollars are poured into pretty much every other medium, whether we're talking about television, movies, YouTube, etc., etc. Considering that the video game industry is larger than almost all other entertainment mediums combined when we're talking about revenue and overall engagement, it really seems like in-game advertisement is something that we definitely will see more of in the coming years. And what that will actually look like, though, we don't know. I can see two different forms of in-game advertisement occurring. One thing is actually something that I do remember seeing back in the day, back when Uncharted 3 was released, but then it transitioned over to free-to-play with the multiplayer. They started having advertisements in the waiting lobby. So you know how typically in an online multiplayer game, you have to wait 30, 45 seconds, maybe a minute, like for the players to load in and for the match to start, like in between games. They actually had ads running during the pre-game lobby. And I actually thought that was pretty intuitive. It didn't feel very intrusive because I was waiting for a loading screen anyway. I was waiting for the match to start and everything, which is just something typical in a multiplayer game. So I didn't feel very like, oh my god, why is this ad here? Especially since it was free to play. But even if it was a paid title, I wouldn't have had much of a problem with that either, to be honest with you. I personally find that to be a lot less intrusive than when they're trying to sell battle passes and, some games that still have loot boxes as well. I find just watching an ad to be a lot better than them trying to sell me all this crap, and especially with loot boxes with the gambling, it's ridiculous. Sometimes even pay to win. But that, I wouldn't honestly have a problem with that. That's one form of video game advertising that we could have. Another one would be the actual integration of the advertisements in the game world itself. We have seen a couple of examples of that. I did actually list a few, like Obama advertising in Madden. I think another one was White Castle in Homefront. That was another infamous example. And that form of advertising I'm a little bit more mixed on, because it could be just an unintrusive banner ad, like if it's an open world game in a city and you just see the ad in the banner but you just keep driving and moving along, kind of like the banner ads in real life. It's pretty easy to just go about your business and move along. But when you're talking about the actual corporate sponsorship or advertisement being integrated within the world itself, like within the story, like for example, a character drinking Coca-Cola or something like that, I mean, that doesn't really seem so bad. But I think the bigger problem would be if these corporate advertisers start to have a lot more influence on the development of the game itself. Meaning, if there is certain content that these corporate advertisers find objectionable, they can pull their weight and be like, well, look at all the money that we're pouring into this game and pretty much helping the development of it and revenue for your company. We don't want this type of content to be in the game. We'll pull all our advertisements from these games if you do not comply. Very similar to the ad apocalypse of YouTube, where a lot of YouTubers now, they're pretty much corporate, Disney-friendly, pathetic shells of their former selves. Like, the people using the quack sounds every time they say a bad word. Shit like that. That just fucking annoys me. I see that as being a huge potential problem with these games, is their influence on the product itself rather than the ads just being there. You know what I mean? Like, I don't really have a problem with the ads being there if they're done a certain way. If it's like, oh, watch this ad, like, it pauses the game and it's like, watch this ad to keep playing, I have more of a problem with that. But if it's a free-to-play single-player game, which is something that you don't really see because there needs to be monetization, maybe something like that could now exist with advertising, and especially like indie developers, if they're offered certain advertising deals and they integrate ads into their games in certain ways that don't inhibit the actual quality and integrity of the game itself, then that could potentially be a game changer in the industry, and that could create a lot of jobs. It could save a lot of jobs. You know, a lot of development studios are struggling to gain revenue. That could be a huge lifeline for a lot of companies, and it could actually be a great thing for everybody. So that's why it's not something that I'm going to automatically say it's a bad thing and that it would be an awful thing to happen. If hypothetically, let's say that these advertisers bring so much money into these games and it creates a situation where these publishers no longer have to rely so much on battle passes, on loot boxes, and all these predatory forms of monetization, I would be all for the ads starting to pour into our games. But being more of a realist than an idealist, it's very likely that we're just going to get these advertisements on top of all the monetization that already exists. And we're still going to have $70 games. Games are still going to cost more. We're going to have that. We're going to have all these loot boxes and battle passes and all this other shit, and we're going to get ads on top of it. So there probably won't be much benefit to the consumer for these ads coming in, aside from maybe the world feeling more real and immersive because it is talking about real products and is using real products in the game because of the advertising. That might be a benefit, I guess. I'd say at the very least, they're just going to be there and you can move on and pretend the ad didn't exist, like it just being in the game but not in your face so much. At the very worst, it could be a huge thing that severely inhibits your gameplay experience and could sway developers to maybe make certain narrative changes and change certain aspects of their game to be more corporate friendly and be more friendly to the advertisers. I'm just going to hope for the best and expect the worst. And with the video game industry, the way it's been the past 10, 15 years or so, the worst usually always happens. So I guess I'll just assume that these in-game advertisements will further dilute the quality and integrity of video games as a form of art and a form of entertainment.